but he also seems to do really well in these, honestly, late-night scenarios, cross-server. That's been a lot of his victories as well. He is certainly no stranger to this situation.
Yeah, as awkward as it is, the quarantine, stay-at-home events and the online situations have definitely been his rise to fame this past year. But guys, we are moving into game number 1 of our grand finals. Starting up here at the top right-hand side of the map, we have our blue Protoss player from the Afrika Freaks. He is Trap.
And to the bottom left is the red Zerg for Team Ents. He is Serral.
Of course, both of these players have been champions. It's still so strange to think about how Serral has not won one of those premier events this year, whereas Trap is the literal opposite. He won many premier events this year, but did struggle in the past few months, whereas Serral looks like he's actually been playing a lot better the past few months.
Yeah, the thing is that, Serral even talked about it, is that it doesn't look or feel like Serral is playing drastically worse. I think a lot of what it is that he did lose the magical clutch factor that he used to have. Because you do think of some of his victories in his, his grand 2018 year. He won all of the WCSs, he won BlizzCon, and we do think about some of the situations where like, oh yeah, he probably was going to lose.
Serral doesn't lose in the game 5, or Serral doesn't lose in the game 7. That used to be a thing, and yeah, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, as long as he is indeed a more, like, I guess, if he is really truly the better player, then that will absolutely show. But if it is going to be a very even match, this is where we're going to be like, yeah, Serral, I think 2018 Serral would have absolutely won, but not current form Serral. And that's not even because he got worse. I think it's because everyone else got better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am really interested to see, after the boppening that did happen in that group stage, though, how does Trap adjust? Because, like you said, he looked really strong versus Dark and everything. Jagannatha was one of the maps that they did play in their best of 3 in the group stages, I believe. And it was the map that Trap went for kind of a depth Resident Evil 4-gate attack, and it just got hard shut down. It's what Ben was talking about. Is just one of those things that Serral does a great job of denying.
Serral's really good against those adept attacks. I asked him about those evolution chamber walls, and I mean, if he had been like, yeah, I'm the one who does them. I don't know why anyone else does it. Like, they're stupid. Like, I'm smart. I would have been like, yeah, I agree, Serral. Like,
you make them look silly.
Yeah, it's very, very good. And I'm surprised that other Zergs sometimes, I mean, just don't get the situation correct, I guess, to build that wall. But then sometimes, legitimately, just like, they don't bother. But we did have, I mean, at least one kind of unique thing happening in the early game here, guys, which is that Trap did go for a Stargate before a Warp Gate. And many of you are probably like, isn't that what's supposed to happen? But, talking with some other Protosses, like, the Koreans had actually been trending more towards Warp Gate ASAP, even when they get a Stargate, and that can affect a couple like follow-up adept builds. But it is something that is going to go, in this case, right to that Stargate. Might just be the actual way to get there as efficiently as possible. I was going to throw out there, it might have been a way to kind of confuse Serral, who might have picked up on that trend and is now seeing the opposite, right? But his Overlord has actually been parked over to the right side, scouted too, by the way, so it's going to die pretty immediately. But it's not going to get a chance to actually go over and see perhaps gas timings, but we expect that. We know the Void Ray is going to come out. It's going to take away that scouting, and then it's going to come down to, is there a trick? Is it actually the Oracle follow-up? Is it Twilight Council follow-up? Are we going to get gases at the natural before the third base? Because if those are the options that are going to make it weird, this is the option that makes it totally normal macro PvZ.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, in the series versus Dark, Trap definitely was trending a little bit more toward the Sky Toss armies and everything, which, I mean, it didn't work so well in that one game versus Serral, but we'll have to wait and see how things shake out in this game. Like you were saying, we'll have to wait and see what buildings Trap is actually going to be throwing down in the eventual near future. But Serral's kind of covering his bases, literally getting up the Spore Crawlers at all the different locations, getting his Queens in position to defend against arguably, actually no, not even arguably, inarguably the best Oracle controlling player in the world.
Since Classic retired, now he's back, needs to get that. He's going to get that title back within a year.
Yeah, I also love that as soon as I say that, it's like, oh, and the Oracle gets nothing done and it gets beat back. Yeah.
Exactly. Serral is going to get a safe Roach Warren here. We see that there is a second Stargate for Trap, so the Roach Warren not exactly needed for defense. I mean, it really does depend on how Serral now wants to play, because now we've confirmed that Trap is playing, I guess, the more macro, typically expected Protoss side of things. We do have to talk about what Serral can do first and foremost. So I always talk about those Queen Walks, absolutely something that he has done very recently on Jagannatha. The Adepts actually get through, but aren't going to bother actually shading in, knowing that they'd probably give up their lives. So very safe, reserved play here from Trap.
Yeah, absolutely. And a Ling or two is going to be spotting out that third base, seeing, okay, like I see your +1 air weapons is being researched, assuming that's not a fake at this point, which would be a pretty odd fake this late on. It is going to be a decent reveal. And you know what's cool about how Serral has been playing against the SkyToss armies is he just looks like he plays extremely greedy. I mean, I'm looking at some of the SkyToss games games he's played against SkyToss. He is rushing out Hive. He's rushing out, getting out all of the answers that he wants and playing extremely greedy behind everything.
He does seem to be one of the Zerg players who, like, more often than others, does add an Aspire option if we're going to, again, not a Queen Walk build. And I'm, like, wondering if that could be the case here. Got it on a lot of gases recently, but he is still droning up. We got Trap adding on the Twilight Council, going to go immediately into that charge. I don't think he's really worried about an attack. And there's that Spire I was talking about. Serral now has the option to use it or have it reveal and then be like, no, not going to use it.
Yeah, and his usage of it has always been a little bit funny to watch too, right? He's been willing to go for the sacrificial Muto play or try and find just bits of damage and say like, yeah, I made these Mutas to kill workers, and that's what they're going to do.
And sometimes that is actually all they have to do. You make 8 Mutas and they find that undefended main base. They bop 12 probes and cause a lot of ruckus. That's actually pretty good. But, you know, more so what the Zerg wants is a bopping of like 20+ probes and then a real panic attack from the Protoss player. Trap really should be quite intent on trying to scout this option. I don't know if he sent out the double hallucination, or I actually don't think he even has Sentry, so of course that would take away the hallucination option. Now that he's lost the Oracle, can we get a check on that Spire?
Yeah, trying to find where exactly.
Oh, he hasn't seen it.
Yeah, that is going to be potentially a little bit rough so far. We do have a lot of gateways being added on alongside charge being put on as well. So Trap is beginning to kind of round out his composition beyond just the handful of Void Rays he made. Funny, he actually really just ended up making only 4 of these Void Rays off of the 2 Stargates.
Yeah, very non-committal. We've been seeing that too, so it's not like surprising nowadays, but you know, it's always that option. Serral is going to dedicate to 9 Mutas, and considering that I think he knows he hasn't been scouted, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's always a little bit tricky if the Protoss does have a decent push at this time, because 900, well, plus the Spire actually, into Mutas isn't exactly a fighting force, but if you can time it right, then the Protoss is kind of trapped in no man's land. They can't quite attack. They don't really want to pull back to defend either. Is this timed right? It's actually going to be really close. Trap's army with 2 Archons already isn't bad against... Oh my god, there's so many Queens. What the...
That is an absurd number of Queens. I'm not even sure if there are many units of Serral dying that aren't just Lings, and we see that Trap gets absolutely bopped, absolutely smacked down. I mean, he tried to go for the slam dunk there, and the hoop literally got slammed onto his head. He is just getting battered back. That was not even close.
That was so amazing. That was actually... When he walked up the ramp, I'm surprised he dedicated. I guess he did maybe have a brief thought where he was like, it's just Roaches and Queens. Like, that's Protoss armies deal with that, but apparently not. And then the Mutas helped out. They took out the War Prism. They're going to be able to do this harassment, or will they try to take out the War Prism? They cycle for the harassment anyways. But it draws Trap entirely back. He does have to take the Muta threat seriously, but he also can't defend his 4th Nexus from the overwhelming ground army. The Queens defended and then walked their butts across the map to help a 9-minute Queen Walk.
Yeah, a very delayed Queen Walk with a Hive behind it. Not something you get to see every day, but All Disruptor number 1 is going to be able to almost get a hit, but it actually gets picked off before it can get the big hit off. And we're starting to see the Phoenix trying to find a little bit of value as they try and lift up some of the Queens, but this army will not be denied. Serral will not be denied as he leads up double the army supply, barrels his way into the natural expansion. He's going to be able to take out that Cybernetics Core and pretty much every single unit here in a very short period of time.
I really feel like Trap is probably looking at this army like it's not actually as unbeatable as the situation looks. Obviously, when the Zerg is storming down your natural and you need to just push back, you're dipping below 100 supply. Like, all terrible signs. Trap absolutely loses this game. But you do see this type of army, and you're like, 10 minutes in, like, maybe I could have actually handled it had I had a concave, had I not thrown away the army like I did. Then he would have been able to buy more time, get disruptors. You see where I'm going with this. But instead, Serral was so overwhelmingly prepared for the push that it was like poking the bear. And Serral was just like, oh, that's it? Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and attack you and kill you.
Yeah, Serral sips his water as he sips victory there in game number 1. He's even going to step away for a moment. But he's got to be feeling pretty confident after that first game. He, like you said, just feels like he had a full pulse on the entirety of that game, knew what was coming, was ultra prepared. And it wasn't even like Serral was going for that attack and he didn't have anything behind it, right? He had his hive on the way with the infestation pit done. He had like his 4-base setup and everything. He was actually at a decent worker count. Like there were a lot of things behind that, it felt like, for Serral as well.
I think that's one of those games that a lot of people will look at and be like, well, that's what happens to Protoss when they don't do anything. And it's like, I suppose, fair enough.
Yeah.
But I feel like strongly, like if Trap had the same reaction that I did, which was and just pulled back. Yeah, immediately, I can see how a game could continue going, because again, he could buy more time, he'd actually be able to even maybe threaten with the Warp Prism instead of having to bring it home immediately, and then maybe he has Disruptors, more Archons, and a couple of shield batteries to help as well. But it was already very poor, and then it just went even worse afterwards.
Yeah, definitely a very rough spot there for Trap and a really, really rough game for him. So with that in mind for game number 1, this is, of course, a best of 7 in the grand finals. This is one of those series where you actually do get a little bit of a chance to try and experiment. The best of 3 group stages and stuff, you get to try basically one game and then you're like, I'm back up against the edge. I really have to like go for wins here.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that Trap is going to be able to get a little bit of information gathering here, and we'll see how he's able to adapt in this series.
It could be something as simple as that Warp Gate timing that I brought up to begin with, honestly. Like these sneaky Twilight Council follow-ups, throw in an actual like Twilight Council first and foremost, but maybe try and actually give them false information. All of those things can still give Trap that little bit of an early edge, which just wasn't really possible in this type of game, I suppose. It is possible, theoretically, of course, that Serral was like worse than he is, basically, and like totally overreacted to nothing, and then was only at 50 drones for 8 minutes of the game. But we know that Serral isn't going to be fooled by anything less than something very intentional and masterful, right? But Trap could absolutely do something like that.
Well, our next map looks like it has been revealed. We're heading on to Blackburn for game number 2 here. So we're going to start down in the bottom left-hand side of the map atop the blue Protoss player from Team Afrika Freaks. He is Trap.
And in the bottom right, as the red Zerg for Team Ants, he is Serral.
Jonas Atala looking strong and is definitely playing super solid. I mean, all of the things about Trap, and I wholeheartedly agree with you about that attack and potentially just pulling back and everything, but Serral just looked really solid across the board in that game as well.
It's just amazing that army was so easy. Like, because it was so many queens that if I had sized up the potential 30 seconds earlier and actually been like, whoa, it's actually a lot of queens, and Trap's preparing like a charged Archon attack, I would have been like, that's too many queens, right? Like that seems like a type of queen count that was trying to defend someone who was going to go up to like 8 Void Rays and Flux Mines, but it didn't matter. I mean, I'm not trying to make a balance statement or anything. It's just like the queens were helpful regardless, no matter what they were up against.
The transfuses definitely helped, and it really didn't feel like Serral was losing a whole lot in that particular situation. So,
yeah,
I don't know, man. This is Blackburn. You do get to play a slightly different game, even though it is kind of a nice map again for like Sky Toss and stuff. We've definitely seen that come into effect with Trap versus Dark and everything. But I want to know, like, does Trap go for that kind of army composition again?
I mean, I really think that there's more potential than was shown. It is partially like, oh, Serral was prepared. He was maxed out. He's fine. But it was also one of the worst situations you could have pushed up a ramp into. I mean, I don't think you really knew what you were pushing into in the first place because his Oracle died.
Even the Spore was there.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a choke. It was up a ramp. Like, that was going to be, it had to really catch Serral off guard, where if Trap, played around more of like an entry into a 3rd or a 4th base and played it kind of slower, then again, he could evacuate, but also might have been able to play around more with his Void Rays, which instead walked head first into like 15 queens. It just, I mean, it was such a flat game, right? Like that I'm hoping and I think that Trap can absolutely be like, nah, that wasn't what I get to show. Like,
that ain't me.
Better. Exactly.
Okay, well, it is going to be another Stargate opening, as is per usual these days in the matchup. Getting up the Stargate, getting up the first Void Ray and another Oracle and everything. Trap going to hang around over here with his probe just a little bit longer and actually go for the pylon block for the 3rd base, which is not something you usually see these days.
You're right about that. Yeah, not as a 3rd base. I mean, honestly, it feels like the pylon block has just been... It's always the probe block. You always, be a bother, but... Their base as well. All right. Well, the Adept is going to get in here and get further scouting. I mean, we did see Serral being a little bit aggressive versus Punny earlier today, but a pretty darn different matchup, to be honest. Early game cheeses from the Zerg in this stage of the game, this matchup. It's pretty much reduced down to like a Ling Flood, which, when was the last time you saw Serral do a Ling Flood?
It must have been a while, although Serral has definitely opened up the gateways, or I should say the doors, and literally opened up gateways in terms of wall-ins and stuff with some early attacks lately. I think Ling Flood's not necessarily quite as much his style, and I have seen more of like the Roach Floods or, you know, just the good old Queen Walk, especially on a map like this sometimes. So
it's kind of the combination of the Protoss, the Warp Gate timing versus the 2 Adept or the 1 Adept Stalker that can confuse a Zerg player. In this case, the Oracle is used immediately to give high ground vision to take out the Overlord, and so that means, obviously, it is Stargate, and that it's not a Void Ray first. And, I mean, I feel like what we usually see is if it's not a Void Ray first, it is triple Oracle. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that might be what Trap's going to do here. I mean, Serral can, at any point in time, bring out a Queen Walk, so maybe like a triple Oracle into some fast Robo off the 3rd base. Could be something that Trap's thinking, you know, mid-game, I'm going to be really good defensively. But it's actually, so far, it's the 2 Oracle, and I feel like we never really see 3. And Gas coming out for the 3rd Nexus, so I think too bizarre there.
Yeah, we're going to see a little bit more of an older school PvP for now as, just 2 Oracles diving around, looking for whatever they can find, which is not a whole lot so far. And Serral also knows the position of those Oracles, so it becomes really tough to get a whole lot done. He's actually going to dive in and pokes away at the Queen. An interesting choice there, is now one of those Oracles getting very low on hit points. Feels very atypical for Trap, maybe because he's microing these Adepts, and he's going to let that Shade finish into the natural. Serral a little bit late on the reaction there with some of those Lings that were there, but it looks like even a late reaction is going to be pretty on point to snipe off 1 or 2 of these Adepts.
Yeah, the Adepts were kind of forced apart from each other, so they weren't necessarily getting to line up those shots. Good cancel there. Good cancel. Now with only 1 Adept, you know, the only 2 shot. 6 drones is better than what I thought was going to happen, honestly, because the Oracles were what I was paying attention to. But the Oracles live, although 1 is very, very weak. And the Adepts, straightforward, their lives from 6 drones, a bit of chaos. This could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah, a little bit unfortunate that Trap also ended up having to recall those Oracles to get them out of there as well. I think got a bit trapped, no pun intended, behind the bases of Serral. Those Queens definitely eyeing on the prize there. But we do see Blink on the way, Sentries being added on, +1 weapons being researched.
Oh no.
Zombie Girl. Oh no. Oh, this is not what you want to have happen right as you have decided on the big attack you're going to do.
And this is also, I think, a scout for Serral, right? I mean, obviously he is, but I think it might be an important scout where he doesn't know exactly what's following up behind these 3 bases. It could be Robo, it could be 2nd Stargate, although probably not that one, but he does see that's a Twilight Council and a Forge. I mean, considering that the Blink attack on this map is still kind of popular, and personally, I always like thinking of Trap as a Blink Stalker player, Serral might be able to infer this could be a Blink aggression, let's just call it, in the middle of the map, kind of control the map. But that was just... I feel like everything's going wrong for Trap, man.
It really does feel that way right now. Well, the Lings are eventually going to get cleaned up here. God forbid they get a probe kill. That would have actually just been a true disaster in the making. But, well, Blinken +1 weapon should be finishing up relatively shortly. Trap has already moved out onto the map with a handful of his Stalkers and Sentries, but we don't exactly have a Prism or anything with this army, and the Oracle does get picked off. That was the weakened Oracle from earlier. Not any fast reinforcements or anything coming here either, so it is just going to be about these few units that are here. And frankly, Zombie Group, it doesn't really feel like that big of a threat right now.
It's not. It's a good poking squad because it also evacuate with Blink and force fields, but what I'm really worried about is that, again, Trap has not done any hallucination scouting. Usually you see like a double one if they really don't know what's on the way, and Serral does have a Spire. Now, Serral might be a little hesitant to use the Spire ASAP. Well, I think actually after pushing this back, he's not going to be hesitant at all. I was going to say if the Stalkers were actually being threatening, maybe he waits, but maybe uses it now to just continue the momentum. Or hell, maybe he just actually continues building Roach Ravager because he's like, this is really going well. I really did push you all the way back.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like Serral should feel he has control of the map for a little bit now after pushing that army back. Even picking off a handful of the Stalkers in a sentry or 2 there. He's picked off one of the Oracles earlier, and that Oracle, speaking of that scouting information you were talking about, does finally dive that Oracle in a little bit further, moves between the natural and the main, but thanks to the creep spread, Serral's able to identify the position of that Oracle, denies a bit more of that extra scouting information Whereas in the meanwhile, Serral gets that Overseer a little bit further in, sees, all right, you're just still chronoing out those +2 weapons. You're still just kind of sitting back on that same tech and doesn't quite see the robotics bay, I'd say.
No, he doesn't. So he doesn't know the Colossus are actually literally about to pop. I was wondering if he was going to make a couple of mutas, seeing that there was no stack defense in the main, but it looks like that Spire really has just been pushed to the side for now. He could get Corruptors later on. Obviously, he could even dive towards Hive if the game went on for that long. But clearly, from this engagement, he's looking to attack. Maybe Trap a little surprised to see a Zerg army in the front of him. But there's the roly-poly for the Banelings finishing up, and Trap is actually forced to move away into his third base and up to his rims. Colossus pops right on top of the army, and that is going to go down. Serral, with, I guess, a surprising blow, is going to do some serious damage to the high-technology units, maybe even to the economy. We see Trap barely holding on with Stalkers now, but this could just be the beginning.
Yeah, even a couple of Queens being pulled in over here. He is continuing to deal damage to the units over at this third base. Queens actually buying time against the Colossus. Then Nexus is going to go down. A blow that Trap, frankly, just could not really take right now. He doesn't have that many gateway units left over. He has a few more warping in on the north side, but I do feel like already Zombie Grub, Serral's done the damage he needed to with this attack, even if he did have to pull Queens to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. The third Nexus goes down. The probe, surprisingly enough, kind of lived, but the third Nexus went down. The fourth is being built off of the rights, which I feel like is going to be easy for Serral. There it is, to get a cancel. And while Trap was building to a very big army, he has been cut at the possibly, worst time, before +2, before all of his Colossus were out. It's going to be a 2-0 if you're Dragon.
Yeah, I saw the head tilt as more of those Colossus get sniped off there for Trap, and Trap is just not going to be feeling good about how this game went. This was absolutely brutal. It felt like his attack, it got a little bit done in the sense that he did manage to poke, but he lost a handful of units. Like you said, Serral just catching him off guard with this big attack and even finding some nice little victories there by the Colossus snipes and everything. Everything is just coming up Serral right now, it feels.
Yeah. And there it is, the 2-0 for Serral to start off our best of 7. First positive, I really did like that Serral decided to just go for the attack. He didn't play around with the Spire. He was like, I see an opportunity, Baneling Speed's gonna finish, let's just go for it. And while I'd say typically a Zerg player being found with Baneling Speed still on the way is favorable to the Protoss, I really feel like Trap's just like, what the heck? There's a Zerg army in front of my base. Because otherwise, he, had he absolutely known for a fact it was out there and building, we've seen Trap have like masterful holds of that type of army. He's really good, even cross-server guys. He just didn't actually have the time to react and set up his army in a proper position. He was forced to decide, how do I defend third or natural, which by that point, as the Protoss player, you'd really hope that you could kind of defend both. But yeah, it was just a last-second decision that, there was really, I guess, no right answer for Trap at that point.
Yeah, even, if you even consider just losing a handful of the sentries over here and a handful more of the stalkers just on that attack. Imagine if there was 1 or 2 more force fields over here to buy just a little bit more time. The next Colossus maybe pops out and you can buy a bit more time there, but this was really already just a tough spot. Getting his army split up over there, that one Colossus is just, I don't actually even think it would have been enough to save him, but it was still just heartbreaking to watch.
I think you're absolutely right about the force fields too, by the way. Like, Trap did have a couple of seconds where he knew the army was coming and he was starting to control the scenario, but yeah, not enough force fields. They're going to be broken, but if you get like a decent number of them, you can predict their corrosive biopredictor kind of thing. And then that gives time for that third Colossus to pop out, perhaps with the entire army, not segmented like it was. But also just want to note, very unfortunate robo positioning. I don't think it could have popped backwards because the pylon was between the assimilator and the Nexus.
That is pretty unfortunate. Well, Zombie Grub, that's going to be a 2-0 lead for our Finnish Zerg player. Serral is going to put him 2 games away from taking this grand finals. We'll see if Trap can make something different happen as we move on to Lightshade, the map that they played in game number 1 in the group stages.
Good point. Yes, it was. In the top left of that map for Game 3, he is going to be a Freak of Freaks, Trap.
Down here in the bottom right-hand side of the map, the red Zerg player from ENCE Esports, he is Serral.
It was so brutal about that last game, too, is that even if Trap had done the miracle hold that we know he's capable of, He just dances around a little bit better, has a couple more force fields, what have you. Serral still had this, like, you know, powerful follow-up potential, too. I mean, his Spire was legitimately still not being scouted, and he did have a decent economy to actually choose to, like, fall back and remax, for instance. I mean, I've definitely seen miraculous holds from Trap, or miracles to me because I'm bad, but even then, I think it would have had to have been one of those holds where I'm just like, damn, Trap's, like, really good, you guys, and then that is a very playable game, but Serral actually had so many options, it felt like, that he could pick and choose, and he chose the one that goes for the throat.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think Trap is an absolute god when it comes to some of the micro involved in his holds and the positional play and everything, but it really did just feel like came to a certain point where the army was moving forward, and I was like, I actually don't think anyone's micro can save you from that spot anymore. Serral's just got too much, too far forward in position that you just can't handle. Do want to quickly talk about the fact that Serral did open up with a pool pretty early on this game. He went for the pool first.
Yeah, he didn't want to actually take the forward third, which actually a bit interesting. Or maybe he thought it was going to get blocked. But, you know, we do see that there are some maps where Zerg players are like, oh no, he blocked my natural. Anyways. And Lightshade can absolutely be one of those. But of all the Zergs I feel like I've been witnessing, it's Serral, of the European Zergs anyways. It's Serral that, like, really is insistent on that natural base. Like, he, like, really wants to get it. And if he can't get it, he'll go for the pool first, which can also sometimes make the Protoss panic. We did see that versus Zaun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like it was. Yeah, he went for a double gateway opener, and we were like, oh, that's a bit awkward.
Like, oh, Zergs don't usually do this. I'm not used to altering my build to deal with this because so few people actually do it to me. I know the response, but it's been a while, and well, Trap is going to have no problem in dealing with a couple of those early Zerglings. He does just make that full wall off for a split second, gets out the first Adept, and should be A-okay.
Yeah, so I really like that Trap is finally bringing out the Twilight Council. It is pretty much the most on-the-nose Twilight Council you can ever do because it's also Light Shade. But that nonetheless, you know, it's still a powerful maneuver, especially if you have potentially kind of given the story of the last game. Like, I can go Adept Stalker and go Stargate. And then you go for the Twilight Council this time. Perhaps Serral does misread this, or at the very least, it puts a little bit of doubt into Serral's mind. He doesn't know 100% what's coming out. Maybe he'll wait for the Oracle like he did last time and be like, oh, that didn't show up. It's probably Twilight Council, but, you know, then we do have a couple options for Twilight Council. I mean, my mind went right to Resident Enclaves.
Yeah, that's also where my mind immediately went as well, Zombie Grub, but my mind also went to the last time we tried Resident Enclaves against him, and it is gonna be a throwback build. We're gonna get Charge.
He's got his gases taken off.
So,
whoa, man.
Zombie Grub, why don't you break down this build? Because it's been a while since some people have seen this build. Some people might not even remember this build. Maybe some people got into StarCraft after this build completely faded out of the meta at this point.
You could be right about that, but I'm guessing most of you guys have faced it on ladder. Like, it's a very cheesy build. As stated, like, you take probes out of gas in the main because you really don't need that much gas. You need to build it with technology and the charge, and then it's all just zealots. It is very... It has to overwhelm with the first wave or it just doesn't work. But if Serral is thinking that this might be a Resident Enclaves build, he'll have like a Roach Warren, obviously. He might not set up his wall, is what I'm thinking of, or he might depend on his wall. Sorry, he might depend on his wall, which I don't think would have the same effect against a charge at all in. But, you know, I'm talking a lot about what Trap's doing, and Serral is just like... He's just like reading this perfectly.
Yeah. Even before the Overlord has moved in and seen the extra gateways and seen the Twilight or the Robo, before any of that, he's just been flooding units.
Yeah, because he's attacking. Like, oh my god, this is so awkward.
Oh, well, I mean, the Chargelets are going to actually be able to push back these Queens very, very quickly over here. The Adepts and the Zealots can take care of Lings pretty quickly. Is this potentially going to work out well for Trap? It looks like so far the Zealots are just getting bullied back after sniping off a handful of the Lings.
I feel like this build, like, absolutely just has to find a greedy Zerg or one that thinks it's something different. But Serral looked like he was going to prepare for an attack anyways, which inadvertently became a perfect defense because charge lots really are not that great. The Adepts, you know, at the very least, they have options of shading and drawing inside of position, focus firing down drones. Charge lots are just... They're one-hit wonders, they're super shallow, and they're not going to win a game unless they won literally right there. The follow-up could still be scary, because Serral did also, you know, cut drones for the attack defense, if you will. But I mean, even then, I feel like Serral's now like, oh, okay, you're playing this type of game? You're trying to do that to me? Sit down.
Well, we got spine crawlers being added on over here for Serral on top of a handful of the drones that he made, but he's actually going back into making more roaches because he knows, well, pretty much the only upgraded unit you can make right now are zealots. And yeah, there are some immortals and stuff coming out back at home, and maybe that's the big follow-up over here for Trap is that he's going to actually add on the robotics bay as he does still move out with the immortal, with a stalker and that prism. You know, Zombie Grub, I can see a world where maybe something like this can work, but it is going to be a really, really difficult ask.
I don't know if this is going to work, but I could see him trying to make sure that Serral doesn't get enough drones to, like, overpower him when he shows up with, like, disruptors or something. Well, we'll see if this works, because he's actually going to commit to it.
Yeah.
Big ol' surround.
Full surround on a lot of the roaches as well as a lot of the queens. Get some great surface area. The immortal in the back is staying alive, although it is getting picked away at by a spine crawler. We're starting to see as the zealots disappear, though. More zealots have to be here to reinforce. Now the roachborn is going to be a little bit further back, but no, looks like Trap has got his eye on the prize to try and go for the kill over here. Ravager, Corrosive Bile almost lands on an immortal, but it does manage to survive. A War Prism over here to pick up these units. But that was an insanely large commitment from Trap. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see in the supply, it's 56 to 94. Serral holding means a lot.
Hey, I really thought that Trap was going to scare but not commit, because I thought maybe the disruptors would be the more powerful second all-in. Hard to say, honestly, like, you know, and I did see a potential there when he got us around, but now we're in a situation where the first all-in failed, wasn't committed to, I suppose, that much, but just the nature of the build is very committed. Second build was definitely committed to, second all-in, sorry, and that didn't work. Does a third all-in really work? No, I don't think so. So you're going to try and macro when your high technology, your dependable unit is a disruptor. It is high technology, but I wouldn't call it dependable.
Fully in agreement with you, especially when you only have one or two out on the field and you're playing against a player like Serral. Now, I love that Serral is just acknowledging the state of this game right now and says, well, I basically just ensure you don't take a third base because you won't have the units for it probably. He does see the War Prism though, and I think maybe he's just respecting the potential of what this could be. He is going to see now the two disruptors popping on out. And I love that as soon as he saw disruptors coming out, he moves his army to the third.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Kill the queen? Like, and then like have to go home with no ammo? Okay, fine. Or you stick around and you again have no disruptors. So I do love the move as well. Of course, Serral had been building up a lair during the second defense, so he already has roach speed. He'll be reinforcing throughout the map very quickly. The third Nexus is so close to finishing, but I think it has to be canceled. He's going to let it go, but that's a couple of Corrosive Biles away from dying.
Whoa. A nice bait there from Trap. He gets an entire volley on the disruptors from the roaches, but picks up and doesn't actually take any damage over there. Now, really wants to keep this immortal alive, drops out the disruptors so that he can pick up that immortal if need be. The roaches and ravagers are kind of getting into an awkward spot now where they're going to have a retreat path, but if they stick around too much longer, I actually feel like it's going to be pretty difficult to get out of here alive.
I was going to say, maybe Serral's playing a little bit too much with fire. It's actually a steady army against what he's been able to build up. Because remember, Serral has not been on like a baller economy the entire time. He's been sneaking in drones when he can. Good sniping the disruptor to ensure doesn't hit his Ravagers, but Serral still only making army at 53 drones to 45 probes when Trap actually did save his Nexus. Okay, I take that back. Never mind, just kidding.
Poor roaches saved the day over there. Even supply block him, and he gets a disruptor snipe. Serral, how good are you? How do you always find these little victories here and there? The Immortal Hardened Shields have been set off. Disruptors do get unloaded, but one of them actually getting zoned out by a Queen and the Spine Crawler. The Zealots now left to fend for themselves. Immortal's starting to take a lot of damage. It barely gets saved thanks to Trap's Ballin' Micro over here. And he does get another Ballin' Disruptor shot, but it does seem like he's starting to run out of steam over here, whereas Serral is continuing to pick up steam.
Yeah, I mean, even being awkwardly caught in the middle like that was another just terrible cherry on top of a terrible ice cream. Like, the Nexus going down has reduced Trap's options to just having to win here, whereas before, like, maybe he could have been just fanciful and defended with his own high ground, his own choke. Now it absolutely is all in. Disruptors killing drones looks cool, but only get 3. And now Serral, again, is like, well, the Disruptor's over there. I'm going to go over here.
Exactly. Starts his push across the map, and 2 Disruptors and a War Prism can only do so much damage, whereas this army from Serral can end the game. He's going to look for another snipe off on that third base. Not the worst connection there for Trap, and He's going to sacrifice his few zealots to actually get another couple of those roaches, but the third base being canceled. This is becoming a death sentence right now. It almost feels like Trap is beginning to dig his own grave, as if you don't have an economy, there's not going to be a great way to win outside of I kill your entire army with the best disruptor hits you've ever seen.
Yeah, it is funny that in a, like, if the third Nexus had lived, there actually so much potential, but as it is 2 base to 3, that is okay for Protoss. It's that he also committed a lot of resources, a lot of engagements, and they didn't quite work out. He is once again going to try and get the Nexus up, and this time around might actually try to defend it, which means that Serral, you know, he might want to drone up a little bit more. Like, okay, he is going to start adding on other options, because I could certainly see any Zerg player over-committing to the idea of, like, I've won, and then getting hit in the face by 3 disruptors.
Yeah, absolutely. Trap is going to be making his push in as Serral is starting to try and get up a few other pieces of tech. The Corrosive Bile is going to be able to land on a lot of these disruptors as their hits are going off. This is the army that is just not going to be able to make it home in time. A nice bit of micro there with the Immortals, but we see that even as they fall, so does Trap. Serral goes up 3-0, continuing a streak of domination here.
I gotta say, some of these engagements are not the finesse pro PvZ engagements we might see. I mean, there's a lot of dodging and weaving, but that final one was just like, basically, Serral, he microed it so that he didn't have to micro it, right? He already had the concave. He literally saw the armor. He's like, jump! And then disruptors. I mean, even if they all got shots, you know, they were the backbone of the army. You're supposed to get more shots. You're supposed to zone out armies, not let your Immortals get totally covered, you know, have their shields pop, and then that's it. So it's just, Trap, when he does get the time to micro, it's up against a Serral who's too well prepared. And when he doesn't get time to micro, it looks even worse.
Yeah, splitting up my army requires a lot of clicks. What if I just click them onto your army and then your army spreads out my army? It's like, oh, okay, I guess that works. You can just kill everything like that. Beautifully done there by Serral. I do think that Trap is having a few of these moments that do look kind of good, even after he's having maybe a bad start or something, but Serral just looks so gosh darn strong. And guys, we're going to try and give Trap a little bit of time to think about what he wants to do in potentially the final game as we are heading into match point for game number 4. We're going to be heading to a short break. We'll be back with the grand finals of Trap versus Serral. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are heading into Game 4 of our grand finals here for the DreamHack Masters Fall. We're moving into Serral versus Trap game number 4, where Serral has a substantial lead of a 3-0
Yeah.
right now.
Even forcing Trap to do something totally unorthodox. And perhaps people would argue that the failed Adept 4-gate attack is about as worse as a failed Charge Lot all-in. As I was saying, Adepts at least give a little bit of, a potential. Charge Lots generally not.
Microability.
Yeah, basically, yeah, that's actually what it is. But Trap feeling like he really had to mess up Serral. Like, no halfway measures, no, oh, this could do a lot of damage, but if not, I guess I'm okay. He felt like he would have been successful with a Charge Lot all-in, 2-base Charge Lot all-in, very old, usually, 9% of the time, very not good. He was really hoping that Serral might misread this, might be overconfident against Adepts, and Serral instead was going for his own attack.
Yeah.
Which, I really do feel like Trap was probably strategically in the right to think that could do some serious damage, but luck does not seem to be on his side in any regard for the series.
Yeah, to be clear, Serral was flooding out Lings and Roaches and making those queens and everything on 39 workers well before he had gotten any real scouting information outside of maybe like some early game signal about the,
Exactly. Like, I do think he was prepping for an Adept defense and then just like an immediate go across the map, but it just worked out still so well against what Trap is doing. Like, it's almost like the mind game didn't matter at all and actually might have hurt you. So it's just, it's very unfortunate that we found ourselves on potentially the last game. But it is kind of fun that it's on Beckett Industries. In the bottom left, up 3-0, he is Serral.
And up here in the top right-hand side of the map, the blue Protoss player. Definitely going to need your energy and your cheers over on Twitter and in the Twitch chat. He is Team Afrika Freaks' Trap. Saw him giving a big sigh there, rubbing his eyes, just not looking like he's feeling too great right now, but he has been able to at least do what is absolutely should just be totally guaranteed on a map as small as Beckett Industry, which is send the probe across the map and deny the natural.
Man, the more I think about last game, the more I actually really like it for Trap strategically. I'm like
Yeah,
not gonna
it's
get
really
over this.
I'm actually really with you. I think it was such a nice throwback kind of strategy and everything that really could have worked out well against almost any other build.
Yeah, well, I think again specifically how Serral can defend an Adept build, which is that he relies on taking out his drone, or just like not having drones on the third or that many, but he builds a wall in his natural, right? So he's like, well, I have plenty of time to build up some roaches, if this is going to get serious. But Serral kind of went for, I guess, the more typical defense, like building up around that 39 drone, and then inadvertently also defended against a Charge Island, which I can almost guarantee he didn't know about until his Overlord got in the main, which the attack was already underway. So, that's just too bad. I really would have wanted to see that happen against a Serral who's like, chamber block, wait, it's Charge Lots? Like, that would have been for me.
No, that definitely would have been an awkward moment there for a moment. But, well, Zombie Grub, Beckett Industry is, in fact, the map that we've only seen, I think, 3.9% of the time, according to the very beginning of the day. So it is not a map that gets played a crazy ton. And usually that, I think, is because a lot of players don't like playing it versus Terran and stuff, so you end up vetoing it, and we don't see it quite as often. But it can also be a little bit of a weird map sometimes, even in this kind of matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not seen in the matchup really much at all. TVT, yes, TVP even, like it's decent. I see people pick it at both sides, or let it through, I suppose, is more so what happens. But yeah, this matchup, not so much. I do wonder if Serral is going to just end this game with a quick head chop with the axe of like a queen walk through the middle. He was quote-unquote forced to take his third, which I put in quotes only because he was legitimately forced, but some Zergs actually even think, oh, closer to your base. Cool.
Yeah.
You just walk across the map.
That is, in fact, just the way that the map works out. It really does feel like Serral is looking extremely indomitable right now, so Trap is going to have to find some way to overcome the massive headaches that have been thrown his way. I mean, Serral's had a sick run to this grand finals where he's basically dropped that one map, I think, to Zaun. Besides that, it's just been clean. It's just been clean sweeps across the board. Didn't drop any maps in the playoffs to Hero Marine or Bunny now. And so far, it looks like he may very well be able to continue that streak in the playoffs.
Actually, you brought up his loss, and I'm like, yeah, that was off of an all-in.
Yeah.
Nidus Worm? I don't remember, actually. But it was an all-in, I know
Yeah.
that much. And he had to kind of recover.
It was the game that turned into an extremely
Yeah, it was a
wonky
clean
base
walk.
trade and stuff.
Yeah, I remember now. I remember now. So, anyways, the only reason I'm, like, even bothering to make that a point is that might be, like, Serral's going to remember his losses in this tournament because there haven't been many. He might actually just be like, nah, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, I know I can win and not have to play out, like, a very difficult game, which he technically could have won against Zaun, right? But it was way harder because his queen attack didn't work.
Interesting.
Oh.
So it is going to be the Fleet Beacon, which is not an odd thing to see in PvZ, but it is a extremely early Fleet Beacon and a Fleet Beacon before the second Stargate.
Yeah.
This is a little bit less normal than the typical transition to Sky Toss.
It's totally atypical. Absolutely. You're going to get your gases before your third base. In this map, the Zerg can't see that gas timing. There's, I think, only one map where they can. And so you do kind of get away with it. The third Nexus might look a little off. Serral got in there and saw it basically be put down. But even then, I mean, the double gas on the natural, if it was scouted, kind of reduces it to only this Tempest build, or there's also a carrier build. But since it's Beckett, yeah, I was going to say, I think we're going to see the Tempest build, because Tempest can actually abuse the mineral lines on Beckett a lot. We see Max Packs do this build a decent amount of times, and I guess Trap also realizes its strength on Beckett.
Yeah, not a build that you get to see super often just because Beckett is not a super common map. And I know that this build definitely popped up a few months ago and everything, but might be a little bit newer for some of the people. So you will see that the Tempest will try to get over those kind of dead air spaces, either around the natural or by the main base, where you can poke in actually perfectly at the position of the third base that Serral took.
And this is also maybe a little bit of safety against the Queen Walk. I think it gets really weird, because I think, from my understanding, it's supposed to be okay against it, but I've also seen Max Packs basically still die.
Yeah,
it doesn't do enough damage.
So this is where I get to use my Cannon Rush knowledge a little bit. The number of Tempests you want to actually one-shot the Queens, which prevents the transfuses and can be really strong in that sense, is 5 Tempests, but definitely like one of the difficult things about that still is that there's going to be a bunch of these other units in the ground. Tempests just don't do damage very quickly. They might be able to one-shot Queens very cleanly, but besides that, it gets a little bit weird and wonky. But Tempests have definitely been revealed now, and we see the Queens very far on the front lines over here. You know, there is enough creep spread going forward here for Serral. I actually think getting to the dead air spaces is a little bit awkward now.
This is awkward, actually. Tempests are also very vulnerable, guys. They get shot down very easily, and to lose a Tempest is just... Oh, that's terrible. You're just never supposed to. You're supposed to be able to abuse this map so much. Or, I mean, even if you're not abusing, like, the minerals like I was talking about, you're still supposed to have the range to out-micro Queens, even on creep. That's just unfortunate.
Yeah, we're starting to see the transfuses coming out on these Queens. Just a little bit of micro back and forth, but we see a Spire being added on. We see Roaches being flooded on now, but Serral's also on a decent work count of 67, which is definitely not too shabby given the current state of this game, I would say.
So Trap, again, like this is going so many games today. Has he seen a Spire? Has he seen a Spire? He's not seen a Spire. Yeah, he might actually just assume that it is a Spire because you can abuse the ground, the impassable terrain so much. As we see Queens once again take out an area
Accelerator zone. I actually love that Serral's playing around the accelerator zones because, yeah, if you're going to micro against the Tempest, you can abuse the accelerator zones a lot better than your opponent can.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But so anyways, so like because it is so abusable, you kind of are defaulting to your opponent getting a Spire. I would say. There and there's the scout, but he was already building Void Rays, which obviously is the right call. Now that he sees it's a Spire, he's like, hey, 100%, I got it right. Which also makes that one Void Ray loss a bit suckier too. But anyways, I feel like Trap has gotten to play kind of his game the most so far. I mean, actually the first 2 games weren't so bad, but still. It's one of those things where I'm like, Trap, you're down 0-3, and your best, like, the best thing I'm giving you is that, like, you got to play a bit of your game. Like, I don't know. Serral might just completely overwhelm him no matter what.
Losing the Oracle really sucks right now. No vision or kind of map presence around. He did flood out a bunch of gateways behind us, and he has Flux Veins on the way, but we can already see that Serral is moving across the map. The Lings ain't going to be able to deny one of the little zealots that would have been a spotter zealot for seeing these Queens and these Corruptors moving to the south side over here. Trap pulled all the way back to his north base. He's even establishing a 4th base in the top left. He might even send a bit of his army up there to deal with 3 Lings. He is going to go for the little warp in there, but his army's just out of position. He might even lose +1 weapons hands here.
Yeah, I think he is. There's nothing here to defend. He had no idea the attack was on the way, and even then, he wasn't exactly in the best situation. He really hadn't done economic damage to Serral or really picked off that many queens, and Serral got to 4 bases, 69 drones on the Spire with enough Corruptors to conquer the air battle. This is just like, what Zerg wouldn't just run across the map and do this.
Absolutely brutal, and we see that Serral continues on forward. Supply blocks Trap. The army that Trap has right now is about the army that he's going to get. There is the prismatic alignment on some of those Corruptors, but the corrosive biles actually zone out a handful of those Void Rays. Corruptor count isn't exactly looking super healthy, but we already seen the natural being taken out. The Fleet Beacon and the Stargate is also in the natural right now. This tends to get very, very awkward for Trap very quickly, and we already see it's almost 80 supply up right now for Serral. Serral has been denied a Grand Finals championship victory at a premier event for so long this year, and he has finally had enough. He is showing us why he is, in fact, the true GOAT of StarCraft.
Unbeatable in the playoffs, man. He's going to go 4-0 against Trap, who is absolutely no slouch in the matchup, but Serral made him look so weak. He made him look just like everything was a bad idea, which it isn't always.
Yeah.
But in this specific circumstance, really, Trap didn't have, he didn't really do a whole lot with his Tempest, sure, but just not having the army in his sights to start the shield batteries, to start the picking off of the queens, was just such a bad situation. And Trap, yeah, it's not going to be this time around either, man. He's not going to repeat the last chance. It's going to be Serral grabbing his first victory with DreamHack Season Finals in quite a while. There it is. Serral is the champion for DreamHack Masters Fall.
Another non-Korean